The debate over U.S. treaties and the ownership of the Black Hills among the topics of discussion in Geneva today as the United Nations reviews the practices of the United States.
I-Team reporter Beth Warden tonight showing us how a local collective is voicing concerns abroad.
South Dakota Native Americans are among the top priorities being discussed at the UN Human Rights Committee meetings in Geneva. The discussion goes beyond treaties and the land. Dignitaries from various countries are asking questions of U.S. department heads. The treatment and ownership of the Black Hills front and center. Stephanie Amiot from the ACLU joined us just after finishing a UN session.
We know that it was illegally taken. As the United States Supreme Court has recognized, it violated the Constitution. The request is that the Black Hills be returned to the Great Sioux Nation.
Lead attorney of Lakota Law Project, Chase Iron Eyes, is part of the collective, along with the ACLU, Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association, and the Black Hills Clean Water Alliance.
The people who live in the Black Hills, who've been there for a long time, didn't have any criminal intent when they purchased land in the Black Hills. I don't feel that they should be punished for that, but we want their support in forcing the federal government to return all of the federal acreage in the Black Hills to the Sioux Nation.
The group claims mining is threatening water quality from the Missouri to Pactola to Belle Fourche.
Approximately 25% of the well waters tested in Indigenous communities contained elevated arsenic levels. And we do know that we have at least 2 EPA declared Superfund sites in the Black Hills from mining operations.
The ACLU claims all levels of government need to be aware of the treaties signed with South Dakota tribes.
Individual states, local, county, city governments are equally obligated to comply with all of the treaties that the United States enters into. That is something that not a lot of local government agencies want to acknowledge or maybe don't even know.
Final recommendations from the review will be released in early November. In Sioux Falls, Beth Warden, Dakota News Now.
We want to let you know that we have requested an interview or statement from the National Park Service and Governor Noem's office, and we await their response tonight.